Welcome to this week's ThesisReady.com tutorial. Today we're going to tackle a fairly technical effect for your website. While roaming the internet, we came across this website. They use a really nice effect that I've not seen anywhere else. This right here is what you see when you land on the page. The site looks normal at first with a menu bar, a header, and a main content area here. But when you start to scroll down the page, you'll notice something really interesting starts to happen. Instead of everything moving, the content area actually looks like it's moving up. The content just swallows the header right up. While all this is happening, the navbar stays in place up top and floats over the rest of the content. Then when you scroll all the way to the bottom, the footer is still in place. This is a pretty cool effect because it allows your visitors to look past everything else and just focus on your content. Kind of a different and cool effect. You can allow your visitors to just enjoy their stay on your page, but your call to action buttons and logos are still there when they first load everything up. This is really different and innovative, and today we're going to show you how to recreate this effect for your website using Thesis. Alright, so we're getting started here. We have a blank WordPress page with Thesis installed on it. Everything is set up normally and nothing really out of the ordinary you can see. The first thing we'll do is quickly go over our design options setup and get everything set the way we like it. I'm going to just hit this big plus sign up here, which expands all the fields below. For the site layout, we're going to use two columns set at 600 pixels for the main column and 300 pixels for the side column. I'm using the full width framework setting like always, and I've set the outer padding to 0. The other big thing that I'll do is lose the multimedia box, mostly because I'm just not a big fan of it. So we'll come back up here, we'll hit the big ass save button, and now you can see that nothing has really changed. That's really it for basic setup. Next we're going to dive into the PHP. The first thing we'll need to do is set the navigation bar to be its own separate full width space. So we'll head over to our custom function.php. Now I'm using Coda on a Mac, so I've got the screen split with my custom functions up top and my custom CSS on the bottom. So we'll throw in this remove action line to remove the default action that places the Thesis nav menu. We'll save and refresh, and you can see that the navigation bar is gone from its default location. The next step is to create a new action, so we'll take the static nav area function and plug it into the Thesis hook before HTML. Now we've built our static nav area. I've copied and pasted the necessary code in here. So we've got a function named static nav area. This was touched on a bit in our call to action video last week, but what this does is replicate the full width section that Thesis creates when you're using the full width framework. So the outer container is called the static nav area with a class of full width. Then inside that is the page element, then inside that is the static nav div, and then the Thesis nav menu, which is an included Thesis function. We'll save and hit refresh, and it looks like nothing has changed, but when we look in Firebug, you can see that it's in its own separate thing here. Next we're going to plug in a call to action box under the header area so we can sort of create what's happening over at Bank Simple. We're calling this the Suite CTA box function. It's just a div called CTA box and then an H2 element that reads seriously buy this thing. Then finally a class of buttons. We won't cover how to make awesome call to action buttons, that's for another tutorial, but we're just using one we already had for now for the sake of demonstration. So we'll save and refresh the site, and now under the header space we have a box with our intended text. It looks boring now because we've not styled it just yet, but everything is there and working, so good so far. That's it for the PHP. Pretty straightforward as far as the PHP goes. We've just moved the navbar into its own element and just optionally created a bit of extra content to throw in the header. Next we'll move on to the complex part of this tutorial, the CSS. Okay, get buckled in kids because the ride's about to get bumpy. It's time to set up all the CSS for this effect. I'm going to start off by going into my custom CSS and getting rid of the .page background. We'll save and refresh, and like usual, nothing interesting appears to have happened. But when we look in Firebug, you can see that each of the page sections have a div with a class of page. In the header area, for example, the wrapper element controls the horizontal dimensions of the site. So if we go to Style and mess with the page element and set the width to, let's say, 400 pixels, you can see it compresses the site. And if we change it back to 960 pixels, it goes back to normal. Setting the .custom.page background to none gets rid of the default background for that. And now we understand how that works. So now we're going to style the custom static nav area, which we created during the PHP portion of this tutorial. You'll notice several things here. First of all, our position is fixed. There are 3 CSS position settings, fixed, absolute, and relative. Fixed sticks the element in a specific place against the browser window. So what we're doing here is sticking the element against the top corner of the nav area. So we'll set the top and left settings to 0 pixels. The other thing we can do when we define a positions element is set the z-index. So we'll now set the z-index to 5. What this does is position the element in its proper place amongst the other elements on an imaginary plane that exists between your monitor and you. A z-index position of 1 would mean it is at the bottom or back layer, while a z-index position above that would be a level higher or a level closer to you. Since this is going to be over the top of the content and header, we want to have the highest z-index. We've set the background of the entire full width element to be white just because that will work well for this demonstration, and it's what we've used in the example site. The next section here is all CSS3 stuff. What this does is add a shadow to the element. A slight drop shadow will make this effect look that much better when the different elements start moving relative to each other as you scroll on your web page. So go ahead and save and refresh the site. So now you can see this little drop shadow here, and you can see the entire header slid up. That's a side effect of the fixed positioning. It's just trying to keep it from blocking other elements, which takes it out of the flow of things. Whereas the height of the nav area was pushing the rest of the content down, it no longer does that. So we need to compensate for that in the header area. So we'll come over here and compensate for the effects of the header's fixed position. The next element in the header is called the header area. This is the wrap that contains the header. It will have a position of fixed as well. We'll set the top to 30 pixels and the left to 0 pixels. We'll also give it a z-index of 1. Padding set at 30 pixels and the background is set to blue. Finally, we'll set the height to 500 pixels. You can set yours to whatever you like for your site. Just be sure that it is approximately 200 pixels larger than will actually be displayed, so there are no gaps in the background. This is just appearance insurance. Trust us on it. So we'll save and refresh the page. So now you can see that the header area is taking over the whole page because we set it to be so large. That's fine, don't freak out. Let's fix that in the content area. Now we're going to define some style for the header element. We'll set the background and border to none, and we'll define a height for it as well. That's all for that. And now we'll go ahead and compensate for the header area having taken over the page by setting up the content area. We'll set the position to relative. The reason we do this is so that we can set a z-index and a top position for this element, but enable the entire thing to move when the user scrolls. We'll save and refresh the page, and as you can see, things are changing here. And now you can see we set the background to a medium gray, and we also set the element up with a box shadow. Now you'll notice the value here is a negative. That is so that this border over here will show up at the top of the element. This is an aesthetic thing, and it helps create a more realistic illusion. This makes it appear that the light is shining in from below rather than from above. Now remember, all of this code is included with the tutorial, so if we've rushed over anything, don't fret, we've got you covered. Now we'll style our call to action box, save and refresh, and now you can see the changes there as well. Now right now the content area is so short that we can't scroll down the page to make sure everything is functioning properly, so we're going to change that. We're going to go into posts and click add new. We're going to call this sample really long post for the sake of demonstration, and we'll add a ton of dummy text into the post. All right, and we'll hit publish, and it looks like that was 937 words, so that should be enough. And now you can see the new post is allowing the content area to take up the proper amount of space. And now when we scroll down, everything slides the way we'd hoped. When you start adding your content, you won't worry about this since the length of the page will naturally be long enough to make this effect work. But you can see down here our footer has disappeared. So we'll hop back over into our custom CSS file, and we'll create our custom footer area and give it a background of black and set the margin top style to 260 pixels. This is so it matches the top setting of the content area. These two values need to be the same, so if you've used a different number than us, make sure these match up. We'll save and refresh, and there's our footer. The last thing we'll do here is to remove the footer's border. Save and refresh, and there you have it. This is a fairly straightforward thing to set up, but a very cool effect. Certainly one that will catch people's eyes when they come across your page. It's something you don't see all that often, so you'll definitely stand out with this on your page. As always, if you have any questions, any requests for future tutorials, or any suggestions for how we can improve these tutorials, please leave a comment or head on over to the contact page and send us an email. Also, if you use this for your site, please leave us a comment with your link so we can see it in action. And don't hesitate to stop by and let us know what the response has been from people you've shown it to. Thank you for choosing ThesisReady.com. We'll see you next time.